Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Today's session is called What's the Story with National Stories? This presentation is actually a part of a new Native Knowledge 360 lesson called The First Thanksgiving, How Can We Tell a Better Story? And we're actually really excited to announce that this new instructional resource just launched on our website yesterday. Now, while today's presentation is designed to think more broadly about national stories, we encourage you to do a deeper dive by exploring the first Thanksgiving lesson on our website after today's session. Our goal for today is to explore how and why telling better stories about a shared past helps us think more critically about choices people have made in the past and choices we make today. National stories can help us learn from our mistakes, understand each other better, be better listeners, and create better communities. So to guide us along the way, we'll use a few tools and frameworks throughout the session. But before we jump in, I'd like to take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Yadira Hadlett, and I'm the Education Specialist and Workshop Coordinator at NMAI in New York. And I am joined by my colleague, Renee.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hako Sila Samamo. My name is Renee Koki. That was a traditional greeting in the Shawnee language, and I want to thank you for having me. I'm the Teacher Services Coordinator in NMAI DC and a citizen of the Eastern Shawnee Tribe of Oklahoma.
Okay. We're also joined by our other colleague based out of NMAI in New York, Bert, who is he's working as the moderator for today's session. Okay, so let's go to our slide on the National Museum of American Indian. Okay. The National Museum of American Indian is part of the Smithsonian Institution. We have two exhibition locations, one in Washington, D.C. on the National Mall and one in New York City located in Lower Manhattan. The museum's collection is housed at the Cultural Resource Center in Suitland, Maryland. Now, the following is the museum's overarching mission. In partnership with Native peoples and their allies, the National Museum of American Indian fosters a richer shared human experience through a more informed understandings of Native peoples. Now, at this point, you might be wondering why we are using terms like Native American or American Indian. For today, we'll be using general terms interchangeably, but we encourage you to review our helpful handout on using appropriate terminology, which will be shared in the resource links a little bit later. Okay, and now let's go to the slide with our landing page for NK360. Through the National Education Initiative, Native Knowledge 360, or also referred to as NK360, we accomplish our museum's mission through the lens of education, where we seek to transform teaching and learning about Native Americans. Native Knowledge 360 provides a whole host of excellent educational resources and professional development that incorporate Native narratives, more comprehensive histories, and accurate information to enlighten and inform teaching and learning about Native America. You as educators have a key role as allies in your classroom, and our work is to provide you with excellent and accurate resources as well as training. So to that end, we've created a tool for you. We'll go down to our Essential Understandings Guide. Okay. As part of NK360, we have also developed the Essential Understandings Guide, which provides language and 10 key concepts to frame understanding of a given topic. These concepts reflect a multitude of untold stories about Native Americans that can deepen and expand your teaching in the classroom. For today, I've highlighted a key concept that best supports our learning for today's session. time, continuity, and change. I'd like to now turn it over to my colleague, Renee, as she'll guide us through a classroom IDM teaching model.
Thank you, Yadira, for providing background on NK360, the context for today, and why it's important to improve teaching and learning about Native peoples. We'd love to hear more from you about inquiry. We use inquiry as a practice routinely in both the museum in DC and New York, as well as for our online lessons. So what you're looking at in this slide here is what is the inquiry design model. So you see the front page of our new lesson. And this is an inquiry-based approach that promotes active learning as students practice critical thinking, they research and reflect and generate new questions. This is a student-centered approach designed for a deep dive around the compelling question. The first Thanksgiving, how can we tell a better story? And this is the new lesson that Yadira introduced at the beginning. The inquiry is then broken down into smaller digestible chunks called supporting questions. At the end of our presentation, you'll get to view a contemporary video for students to connect the topic of telling better stories to the present and to uplift and have students recognize their own agency. This is a really important aspect of all of our lessons that the NMAI creates to share stories of Native people's lives today. So very, very important aspect of our lessons. Next slide, please. So the new NK360 lesson has a supporting question, as I mentioned, and this one contains a set of sources for students to analyze and practice skills that lead them to a final, summative, or ending task, where students will build their own evidence-based claims to answer the compelling question. This example of a supporting question one, students will look at public history sources, children's books, as you see, and Wampanoag perspectives to answer the story, how has it been told, and why it might need to change. With so much information, I think, coming at us from all sides today and in today's society and environment, it's a very important skill to analyze sources for perspective, for bias, and for accuracy in order to be able to provide evidence of a position or opinion, so sort of to back your position or stance up. Like all of our lessons, this inquiry meets discipline standards, in this case, social studies and English language arts, and we're really excited to have more English language arts offerings. So this is a great one for those classrooms as well. The inquiry you just saw is a case study of Thanksgiving, but today we're going to keep it broad and talk about national stories in general. Next slide, please. So how do we start the inquiry process? With a question, of course. So we begin our lessons with a section in the inquiry called Staging the Question. And this is really to generate curiosity with our students. We'll practice this activity in class, and we'll have a short discussion around it. So we have the goals of trying to understand the definition and purpose of national stories and think about who are national stories for and why do we tell them. So in the next slide, we'd like you to think about a national story that you grew up with. You can jot this down on a piece of paper, but think about a story that you learned as a student. And Yadira, I'm going to ask you, what's a national story that you grew up with?
Thanks for the question, Renee. And I did think a little bit about the various memories as a student learning about national stories, though I didn't know that's what they were at the time. And I have to say the earliest memory I have was when I was 5 years old and I was doing arts and crafts to prepare for Thanksgiving. And one of the crafts that stands out for me is the outlining of your hand in brown construction paper. And you'd cut it out and you decorate it, and voila, you'd have a Thanksgiving Day turkey. Now, I'm sure like most of us, as fun and wonderful as the arts and crafts and the stories were from an early age, those key concepts and ideas around friendship, peaceful gatherings, feast, those ideas well, we're challenged, as I learned more throughout school and even as an educator. So that's one of the earliest memories that I can think about when I think of national stories. What about you, Renee?
Thanks for sharing that, Yadira. I mean, I also had a similar experience in elementary school with the turkey. And I've got to say, my kids even brought those home, when they were in elementary school. So that really hasn't gone away. Another one that I grew up with, because I grew up in Oregon, was around the Oregon Trail. So there was a video game. I understand, an early style video game. And I understand that, there's still a version. In fact, my daughter was showing me the other day. I was curious about, had the narrative changed on that? And how did it work? And kind of what perspectives were told through that game. So the Oregon Trail, so to speak, was one that I grew up with. And, I'm guessing the audience, things that come to mind when we were talking earlier with our colleague Bert were things like Columbus's first landfall. Lewis and Clark might be a story. Depending on where you, were kind of raised, it might be Jamestown or Sacagawea or Sakakawea, depending on how you say it. So, all of these stories, sometimes they can leave out often important details and even be kind of one-sided. So I really appreciated how you mentioned, you were kind of challenged as you learned more. I appreciate that. And let's go a little further. If we can go to the next slide, please. It's kind of going back to go forward. So let's talk really broadly. Defining it very broadly, what is a national story? Just really simply.
Renee, can I jump in and ask what words and images come to mind for you when you hear national stories?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a story that affects a lot of people. So it kind of has national importance. So it's affecting many people, in this case, in our country, in the United States, although we might have some international visitors today, but for our country, it might be tied in with our national identity, who we think we are. And they're retold again and again. Do you have anything to add, Yadira?
Yeah. I asked our colleague Bert, who's born and raised in New York, if he could also think of some words and images or ideas that came to mind when we said national stories. And his answer was the iconic Macy's Day Thanksgiving Parade, which you don't have to be from New York to know how iconic that is. I grew up watching that on the TV. So in addition to that, he also shared that he recalled feather headdresses and pilgrim hats, all made out of construction paper.
Yeah. I think I didn't really answer the image part, but when you mentioned the parade too, it's like, I imagine a lot of people, a lot of different people, at sort of public events and things like that coming together. So, that's, I think, a really vivid example. And these questions bring a lot of curiosity to my mind. It makes me wonder, who are these stories for that we're told or that we learn in our textbooks or in our classrooms? Why do we tell them again and again? So in the next slide, we look at our goal, which is really in this first stage, or staging the question part of the lesson, it's really to create curiosity around national stories. And these things that we remember, they stick with us, as evidenced by your example, Yadira and Bert's. And it's really important to revisit these stories we learned as students so we can go back and learn better ways of telling them.
Excellent. So now we're going to go into a video, and you're about to view a short video that you can use in the classroom. It's actually an excellent resource, and it'll help you set the stage or stage the question and spark curiosity among your students. Now, while you're watching the video, we'd like you to think about who these stories are for and why we tell them. So we'll go ahead and play the video when they're ready.
Listen up. Today we're going to learn about national stories.
Stories about George Washington or something?
Think a bit bigger than just George Washington.
A story about the Grand Canyon? It's pretty big.
Sorry, not that type of big. I mean, it covers more than just one person or thing. A story about a bunch of Grand Canyons? I'm talking big stories from history that are simplified so they are easy to tell.
Simple sounds quick. Let's get this over with.
Well, that's the problem. Simple stories don't always tell the whole story. Let's start with the simple story of Columbus you've probably heard many times. The incomplete story goes something like this. In 1492, Columbus discovered a new continent, met native people, and lived alongside them in land he claimed for Spain. Eventually, other explorers would come to the New World and do the same. The end.
Simple. I like it.
Yes, but is it too simple? This was not a new world for Columbus to discover. Native peoples of these islands had their own homes, culture, and technology before Columbus. And he took gold and people of this region back to Spain against their will. Native people fought back, and many were enslaved. The simple version of this story leaves out important details.
So there are other stories like this?
Lewis and Clark's expedition. As the story goes, they explored the wild frontier. Together, they discovered and named new plants, animals, and landmarks. Along the way, they met a Shoshone woman named Sacagawea. Sacagawea guided Lewis and Clark and helped them negotiate with many tribes. That's the simple story, but it leaves out details. This was not a wild frontier waiting to be discovered. The plants, animals, and landmarks had already been known and named by native nations. What little we know about Sacagawea says she knew a lot about these lands and their wildlife. But she used it to aid travel through native lands, not make deals for the United States or deals for the explorers. Yeah, I never heard that side of it. A lot can be left out of a national story.
How do we know what is real history?
First, you have to keep in mind that any story told can have errors. And most importantly, you have to check the sources of any story.
What's a source?
It's where a story came from. Let's look at the story of the Revolutionary War. England and its colonies fought for the claim and control of North American land. The colonies finally defeated England, resulting in a new nation. This story leaves out some details. The British and the colonists weren't the only fighters in this war. Native peoples had been fighting to protect their land for decades. This war was part of that fight. Individual communities had to decide what was best for them. As a result, some fought on either side of the war, while others chose to stay neutral. When the war ended, Native people would continue to do what was best for them as more land was taken.
What about Thanksgiving? Is that a national story?
Let's look. The Pilgrims first settled in the New World at a place called Plymouth Plantation. They had a feast to celebrate their first harvest. They invited friendly Indians and everyone was friends. The national story changes a detail from English records. The Indians weren't invited. The Wampanoag describe it differently. The Massasoit, their leader, brought 90 men to investigate the settlement. The Pilgrims offered them food, and they stayed, hunting and offering food of their own. But they did so to keep an eye on and negotiate with the Pilgrims, not to celebrate their claim of the land.
I have another question. Does knowing the truth about these stories help? It kind of makes history more sad.
The truth is important even when it is sad. The truth can help us learn from our mistakes and help us understand each other better so that we can be better listeners and create better communities. And remember to ask for more details about any story. Anyone have another question?
Actually, I have one.
I hope you enjoyed that short video that's online and available as part of the lesson and also as a standalone. And what I heard during the video is that a lot can be left out, that any story told can have errors, and to check the sources of any story. So let's build on some of our thinking and from before when we were talking about what national stories are. To me, they're really big stories that are simple. They're not always accurate, and they can be one-sided. Luckily, there's a lot we can do to tell better stories. So one new question that we might ask with our students is, why do we tell these types of stories and who are they for? Historically, the founding stories have not always, as we all know, been inclusive. Often these stories have been told to uplift certain narratives and reaffirm a nation's ideals, identity, or maybe who we think we are. And they actually help to build national identity. And I always say this, that, these lessons and the stories that we share through our professional development and the stories that we've worked on with Native people aren't Native American stories. They're all of our stories. So finding your place in this history and these cultures today, and, having this opportunity to listen and learn from one another is just a really important part of the work that we do. So knowing that they help to build a national identity, this is my favorite part of the presentation, because on the next slide, Yadira is going to talk about how we can tell a better story. Yadira?
Yep, thanks, Renee. So now comes the action. How do we tell a better story? And by better, we mean more accurate, assess primary and secondary sources, use multiple perspectives, include contemporary and Native voices. So use this lesson as an opportunity to practice and do social studies, just as we have here in the slide. The truth is important, even when it's sad. It can help us learn from our mistakes and help us understand each other better so that we can be better listeners and create better communities. We'll go to the next slide, which is another example, a wonderful video resource that we also have on our website. Renee?
Thank you for sharing, Yadira. Yeah, we're really happy and enthusiastic to share a new resource. It's called the Cranberry Day video. It is on our website as well and tied to the lesson. And we developed this in collaboration with the Wampanoag community. While you watch the video, look for examples of how this might tell a better story. Feel free to jot your ideas down or in the chat. We'd love to, look back on how you've been engaging with the material today. So we'll go ahead and share the Cranberry video, please.
Wanikisak, Metasawis, Durwood Vanderhoop, Nutomas, Aquanahanut, Wananatai Aquanahanut. Good day, my name is Durwood Vanderhoop. I am a member of the Wampanoag tribe of Gayhead Aquina. Today is our Cranberry Day. We are down on our Wampanoag common lands. They are part of our current reservation lands.
It's important to come to Cranberry Day because this is such an Aquina Wampanoag holiday. This is something that we've celebrated for generations, and Cranberry Day's taken different form over the different years, but it's always a time to gather together and to harvest the cranberries and to sing some songs and to smell the fires.
As Indigenous people, we have many harvest festivals, many celebrations of harvest, whether it be the first fruit of the season, which is the strawberry, or the herring coming up the river in the spring, and the cranberry at the end of the season. We celebrate these harvests, and it's for us, it's an important way of honoring the gifts of the earth and the gifts from our Creator, and remembering our heritage and remembering our traditions, which are critical to maintaining our culture.
We're here in Mashpee, Massipia. We are in the education site at the Mashpee Wampanoag Museum, and this is a WeQ that we're sitting in right now. It's one of our traditional homes covered in bark, so it would be typically a winter residence. A lot of our festivals are called Thanksgivings because we're giving thanks for the best of the season. It's really important to do that because to keep the tradition going is that a lot of people just think of Thanksgiving as the one day all year where we give thanks for the bounties from the earth, but we do it daily.
One big thing I want people to really understand is that today it's called Cranberry Day. From what I heard from my elders and the way I was taught was it wasn't one day. Back in the day, people used to come and from what I know, used to be out here in the cranberry bogs feasting and harvesting, but sometimes it was for like a week at a time. And that's historically accurate to what our people did.
So I'm going to read a passage to you from my book, Cranberry Day, a Wampanoag Harvest Celebration. Cranberry Day, where do we begin? Sasamaniash is Wampanoag for cranberries and means sour berry. I was taught that every living thing has a spirit, and that if you prayed to the Creator, then the Creator might bring a bountiful harvest. Throughout the warm seasons of the year, there were many fruits: strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, grapes, beach plums, and cranberries. Along with the harvest of these fruits were many celebrations. Sometimes people call them Thanksgivings. But of course you know that there are other celebrations besides the harvests. Cranberry Day is one harvest that we still celebrate. The cranberry is one of the last fruits of the growing season and was very important to our ancestors.
I do like the thought that that this is a, that there's this long uninterrupted, connection with my ancestors, with those who've come before, that they were doing this, 100, 200, 300, or who knows, however many years ago. There's a lot, through our long colonial history here that has been lost, and very few of our original celebrations that have survived uninterrupted to today.
The truth about the original Harvest Festival that occurred in Plymouth in 1621 is really important because it overshadows Wampanoag and colonial history overall. It is a source of stereotypes. It's a source of marginalizing Wampanoag history. It's a source of forgetting. Some acknowledge it as a national day of mourning even because of those sacrifices and because we continue to strive for justice in so many ways, whether it be land and culture or language.
When I was a little girl and we used to go down to the bogs for Cranberry Day, I remember being in the back of a pickup truck. And I think that the old folks always talked about the ox cart ride. And I think that they were trying to recreate that experience for us as children that they had.
Passing these traditions on to my daughter is something that I've always wanted to do once I had children. My daughter, seeing her out there harvesting cranberries, the fact that she loves it, it's a great feeling. Because that's the way I was taught. When you become of age, you're always supposed to hand off your traditions and always supposed to teach the younger children. And to see my daughter learning these things, not just harvesting, but my daughter's also been singing with me and learning different songs, and it's truly a great feeling.
I know that our kids are making the connection to their heritage when they attend events. They're learning about how unique and special they are because of their culture and their heritage, and in that way, they may not even be noticing it, but yes, they are learning to be modern traditional Wampanoags, and we are still here, that we have evolved as people, and that we drive cars, we live in houses, and we are still rich in our culture and our heritage. We are unique and special in that way, in spite of all that occurred over the many years since then. We are still here.
So we really hope you enjoyed that video. And there's so many images that come to mind, and I'm really curious what the teachers are thinking right now, but some of the images that come to mind, Yadira, and please, jump in and add to this, but I was thinking of the herring in the spring and the smoke and the fire, just some intergenerational examples we saw of families,
Go ahead. Sorry, Renee. I was going to share that the intergenerational piece, which is that great balance of contemporary, older generations with younger kids coming together and sharing stories. I think that was one of the pieces that stood out for me. So yeah, continue.
Yeah, that was really great. And I like how they talked too about how, it has changed over time to acknowledge that, as Native nations, we're really related families, big groups of families. And, in our histories, we had challenges, but we're still, maintaining. And the Wampanoag just give this beautiful example in the cranberry bogs with all the colors. And, I think it's really helpful too for teachers to have, and I wanted to mention this in our lessons, often we have audio pronunciations, but hearing them say who they are and, with the pronunciation, and it's just really helpful. I think it's a really helpful tool for teachers. Are there other images or things that that came through or stood out on the video to you, Yadira?
I'd also like to just emphasize that it was interesting, and it was really appreciated how there were different sources, primary sources, and firsthand lived experiences that were shared and documented through the video. And it was all through the perspective of the Wampanoag people. So I really think that spoke loudly for me.
Yeah, and I think there is there are some questions about sort of cultural objects, and we saw the use of some of those, people use modern things, and then sometimes, are rekindling, or in some communities have continued to use cultural items for gathering the cranberries, or, very modern things. So I think it's important to show kind of that spectrum of Native people. And it's not, if you're not using traditional things, that you're not just only of the past, right? That people continue, culture continues to evolve, and that's true of Native people as well. So I think we can move to our next slide. So national stories can help build group identity and, and belonging. And so, I was even thinking, I'd love to hear from the teachers, but it would be really great to, kind of see the types of questions they might ask their students. But as I was thinking about it, I was thinking about, my own family and my kids, and how, what kind of images come to mind around their culture or around one specific tradition, so that they can kind of have this sense of belonging too. As well. So I think, we might be able to ask some questions of our students while watching this video as well. So we hope that it encourages all of us to ask questions and seek out more complete answers. We never really say in NK360 truth with a capital T. We're always talking about getting closer to more complete stories. And that's what we seek to do. So as an educator, we are wondering, kind of what step would be next that you might take to tell a better national story. So that's a seed that we want to plant. And I think we have some questions and answers in the Q&A. So while you're thinking about your next step, we'll go ahead and move over to the Q&A.
And I'll just say that I know as we were going through some of these broader questions around national stories, some folks in the chat were asking, well, what might be the best way, especially given, a grade band, say first grade, second grade. And so I do think that the first step would be to explore our new resource on the website. Because you'll see just a host of wonderful activities and lessons that can be adapted to all sorts of grades. Though it is geared for upper elementary. But I do see a lot of ways where educators may be able to adapt a little bit.
That's right. It is grades 3 through 5, I think it is, for the Thanksgiving lesson. And we have, you know, just a range of ways that you can go on our website and look for grade, or you could look for subject, or you could even look for tribal nation. So we really encourage you, and we'll share, of course, the website direct link to our Native Knowledge 360 website.
I also want to just share some of the national stories that other participants grew up with. And I think this may be very familiar for some of our participants. So we had George Washington chopping down cherry tree, and some recall Columbus as the hero. Let me see here, and I'm looking for a couple more. We will give you a moment. I know we're slowly wrapping up. So if you have some of those national stories or ideas that you'd like to share, please do so in the chat.
Yeah, going back, Yadira, to this idea that Columbus was a hero. I mean, even I think just really simply, I was thinking about, you know, the word Columbus discovered in the video. And so even the choice of words, how can we just, you know, make shifts in our language? And I think that from discovered to, you know, landed, right? And to acknowledge that Indigenous people have stewarded and cared for these lands for thousands and thousands of years, including, of course, the Taino people. So that word choice is really important. And I think that's why the essential understandings that you introduced the teachers to at the beginning, that we also have in English and Spanish, and that should be in the chat for recommended resources, is really that tool that can help you have some language to speak more accurately and inclusively about Indigenous people. So word choice is so important, and we hope that that is a helpful tool. And just hearing on the video too, in this particular example, that, you know, Columbus was after gold and people, and using the word enslaved, those are really important to start bringing into the conversation. I think even at a younger age, that it's appropriate to use those words. So we had a question. I know we have a kind of, I'll say, a tough question around genocide. And I don't know if, you know, if you want to kind of read it out loud, Yadira, but in the Q&A, we did have a question around how do we teach about, you know, something very difficult like genocide to younger audiences. And I wanted to mention that we do have a new Gold Rush lesson, and it's a source investigation. So students have, I think, 11 sources to choose from, and they examine these sources to answer the compelling question around the UN definition, actually, of genocide. So they use evidence from the sources and write an argument and sort of build a claim. And these are from, you know, primary and secondary sources. The other thing that's really important but that is not for younger students, that is for, you know, older students. Another important aspect of this lesson is under the teacher materials. It says before you begin in the Gold Rush lesson, we had really looked toward Learning for Justice. They have a really important Let's Talk guide and critical practices for social justice education. So there's strategies to plan discussions and to facilitate critical conversations with your students. So we really recommend reviewing those resources before you begin. And those are linked into the lesson itself.
I'll go ahead and share. Another participant shared that they grew up in New York City, so a national story for them was the story around the Lenape selling Manhattan. And that's actually a great segue into another excellent resource that we have that you can find on our website. It's part of the Native New York Early Encounters classroom resource. And it also provides just a host of activities. There's a graphic comic book and some other wonderful resources that you can bring into your classroom. Yeah.
That's an excellent resource. And though I'm not from New York City, I have actually used it with my students because they were learning about the Dutch and New Amsterdam. And so it's a really fantastic resource. And I hope I'm remembering this right. I think it's upper elementary, like 4th through 6th. But, we'll of course send all these resources that have come up during our conversation today. But that is an excellent resource and has a very powerful on-site exhibition as well. That's really good.
And if I may go back to Thanksgiving, someone did share that for their family, well, she says, my family celebrates Thanksgiving as a sense of freedom of being an immigrant family from the Caribbean. We see Thanksgiving Day as a day of gratitude, but thank you for this reflection. So I really appreciate that you shared that. And I think that this also gives us yet another way to look at this national story of the first Thanksgiving from an immigrant perspective. So thank you for sharing.
That's so important. And I think, again, hearing each other out and hearing different perspectives, I mean, it certainly has become something completely different today, and it means a lot of different things to different people. So just taking the time to listen and hear other perspectives helps us build empathy and understanding. And I think we have additional resources around. I think there's a blog on Thanksgiving and different things as well from the museum.
I'll give folks just another moment if they'd like to share. And I'd like to bring that last question that Renee posed at the end, which is, what is your next step? As an educator, what might you do next to tell a better story?
We do have a question around, I see, while people are thinking about those ideas around Native arts and crafts. And the question is it okay to do Native arts and crafts? This is, a bit of a loaded question, I'll be honest, because there's a lot of perspectives, but you can definitely look towards people who write about this. We want to make sure that we're not, moving into any type of cultural appropriation. Instead learning about a Native artist and appreciating, their tradition, their craft, their culture. So to this effort, we're a few years out, I will say, but we are looking at how we can provide teachers more support to introduce you to artists. Maybe it's an artist in the spotlight and you learn about their tradition, but not necessarily, replicating Native arts and crafts, I would say in general, but there are a lot of scholars out there. I'm thinking of Adrienne Keene has a great, really dynamic blog. You might look towards her work. I think Jessica Metcalf also does some work around this. So there are people writing about this and, so you can kind of understand the issues, but it is such a broad question. Are there any other arts materials on our website that we can think of? I mean, we have some great just learning about the artist through our magazine and a lot there. So I think that's the first step, is just learning about the artist.
Excellent. And we're going to go back to Gold Rush. We had a great question. And it is, do you know if the NK360 will expand the Gold Rush materials? So as Renee mentioned, currently the Gold Rush resources that we have are geared for older grades. At this point, we yeah, we do not know if we'll be adding or expanding it to younger grades. But we do encourage teachers of lower elementary grades to become familiar with the materials. The resources, videos, the source investigation set, all of those are really, really amazing. And so we would encourage educators to get familiar with that, even though it might not roll out in the classroom, say for a second or third grade class.
Yeah, the Gold Rush is geared at grades 8 through 12. And yeah, we invite you actually to come. We have a professional development coming up. And I think maybe that could take us to our next slide. We invite you to, maybe then it showed
Oh, the last slide, sorry.
the last slide, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that shows our Gold Rush summer webinar that's coming up actually next week. So please do sign up. It's free, it's online. And the first day is really the history. So we, while the source investigation is geared at grades 8 through 12, we think any teacher, and especially, teachers in California, but this is a national audience, can really benefit from learning this history. I looked and learned a lot, and I'm a total newcomer to this material and just learned so much. So we invite you to come. Please join us next week for that. And we do have a missions lesson. I was thinking about missions. So that's another source investigation. It's not out yet, but it is forthcoming. And missions has, I believe, a kind of older grade, and then a companion 4th grade, because we know that missions could improve, right, the telling that has been told in classrooms about missions. So that is, and it happens at 4th grade, or occurs at 4th grade. So that will be coming out as well.
Well, I think we can wrap up. I don't see any more new questions in the chat here. All righty. Yeah, and if there's anything else you'd like to add, Renee, maybe.
That's it. I just want to extend my heartfelt thanks for all that you do in the classroom. You really are our allies, and we love dialoguing with you. We're used to really hearing what you're thinking, and so thanks for engaging in the Q&A. And, we really appreciate the work you do every day, and we hope to see you in a professional development again really soon.
Thank you, everyone.